Hello. In this video, I'm going to be going through a few of the problems from practice problem set 1-2 with you. Like in practice problem set 1-1, we are in 1-2 using premise introducers and conclusion introducers in order to identify conclusions. The difference between 1-1 and 1-2 is that 1-1 just had structures, no content other than the introducers, whereas practice problem set 1-2 has actual arguments with actual content. But still, we'll be drawing on those introducers from box 1A and box 1B in order to identify the conclusions in 1-2. I hope you noticed that there are a couple of sample problems I've given you for this practice problem set. They show you the format that your answers should follow. And by the way, this practice problem set is one of the practice problem sets that is a model for your first homework assignment. The other is practice problem set 1-3, and I'll be going through a few examples from that in a separate video. All right, for most of these, I'm not going to write anything on the board. I realize there's kind of a bad reflection on the board when it's in this position in my house, but I'm just going to use a little bit of the board towards the end of working through this. I'm going to start with number 6. This says, on the streets of Nagasaki, visitors from east and west have mingled for many centuries with the Japanese. Thus, the inhabitants of Nagasaki have absorbed many influences from foreign cultures. Well, first thing we need to do is look for a premise introducer or a conclusion introducer. I hope you notice the conclusion introducer, thus. Since that's a conclusion introducer, the statement right after it is the conclusion, as follows. The inhabitants of Nagasaki have absorbed many influences from foreign cultures. Okay, turning now to number 7, Barack Obama wrote the following. In today's interconnected world, it's difficult to penetrate the consciousness of a busy and distracted electorate. As a result, winning in politics mainly comes down to a simple matter of name recognition. Let's look for the introducing, in this case, phrase, not just word, that President Obama used here when we find as a result. The phrase as a result introduces a conclusion, so President Obama's conclusion is the statement immediately after that. Turning to number 8, this reads as follows. Not all injustices are evils, as the harm they produce vary greatly in importance. Our key word here, the introducing word, is the word as, all by itself. The word as, used by itself as an introducer, is a premise introducer. So the premise is the statement after it. That means by process of elimination that the conclusion in number 8 must be the only other statement there, which happens to be at the beginning, namely, not all injustices are evils. Now I want to write on the board for a moment something having to do with introducers that involve the word as. We saw in number 7 that as a result is a phrase that's used to introduce a conclusion. Another phrase that's used as a conclusion introducer, I'm just using CI as short for conclusion introducer. Another phrase that's used as a conclusion introducer is the phrase as such. Don't confuse that with the phrase such as. Such as does not introduce part of an argument. Such as introduces examples. It means for example or like. But then in number 8, we had the word as used by itself rather than in a phrase. When as is used by itself rather than in a phrase, it introduces a premise. And there are a couple of phrases as well that include the word as and that are premise introducers. One is the phrase in as much as, and then another is the phrase seeing as. It can be difficult to keep all of these distinct from each other, and that's why I wanted to take a moment to write them up for you here. You will find all of these in boxes 1A and 1B, but I wanted to kind of foreground them for you. All right, let's go on now from number 8 to number 10, which says, the 1990 census reported that only 685 people of Japanese ancestry lived in Little Tokyo, along with 80 Koreans and 28 Chinese. It follows that the social and economic viability of Little Tokyo rests largely on Japanese Americans who live in the suburbs, but who return occasionally to buy Japanese goods and enjoy a favorite restaurant, and also on tourists from Japan who prefer familiar hotel accommodations to more westernized ones. What jumps out at me in this passage is the phrase, it follows that. That's a conclusion introducing phrase. There's a sense in which you can think of an argument as a set of statements where the conclusion logically follows from the premises. That's a pretty vague way of understanding what an argument is, but it's also not wrong. So it follows that phrase, it follows that, is a conclusion introducer. The conclusion then would be the entire rest of the sentence after the phrase, it follows that. Let me turn now to number 11. Number 11 is the first problem in this practice problem set that has more than one premise. Number 11 reads as follows. All sounds are caused by something moving back and forth very fast. When something moves back and forth very fast, we say it vibrates. So, sounds are caused by vibration. The word so is our key here. When the word so introduces part of an argument, it introduces a conclusion. That tells us the conclusion here is sounds are caused by vibration. And the two sentences, by the way, before that final sentence are premises that are working together to support the conclusion. Before I read anything from number 12, let me show you that I just gave you a little note here to try to help you understand the passage. Please do read notes that I give you, whether they are in your textbook or especially in your homework assignments. They're meant to help you understand something important about the passage. Sometimes you'll find you don't need them, but very often you'll find that you do. Let me also just mention that I do not speak Tagalog, and consequently I may mispronounce some words here. If I do, I apologize in advance. This has to do with a Philippine folk dance called Sublian, and it says the term subli is derived from two Tagalog words, sub-sub, meaning falling on the head, and bali, which means broken. Hence, Sublian dancers appear to be lame and crooked throughout the dance. The key word here is the word hence. Notice that that has the same meaning as the word therefore. The word therefore is the word I think of as the model or paradigm of a conclusion introducer. So that tells us hence must also be a conclusion introducer. And then the conclusion, of course, would be the following. Sublian dancers appear to be lame and crooked throughout the dance. Okay, let me jump down to number 15, and that's the last one from this practice problem set that I will go over in this video. In this quote, convicted mass murderer Charles Manson was talking about life in prison. So when he uses the word you in this context, he's not talking about a specific person. He also doesn't mean people in general. He means prisoners in general. He says, if you snitch, you leave yourself open to be killed. I could never snitch because I wouldn't want someone to kill me. All right. To understand this, first off, let's find an introducer here. I hope you notice the premise introducer because partway through Manson's second sentence. And let me go back to the board now for a moment. Manson has one sentence, then there's another statement, followed by because, followed by a third statement. There are, in this second sentence, two separate statements. The word because, we know, is a premise introducer. Ignore the first sentence for now. Pretend it isn't even here for a moment to understand this argument. You already know from many examples you've seen this early on in chapter 1 that in a structure like we have in Manson's second sentence here, by process of elimination, the only place the conclusion could be is there, right before because. So that's his conclusion. I could never snitch. What's going on with this first sentence? Well, from the structure alone, I don't know. The first sentence might be part of the argument or it might not be. It might be like a topic sentence or a side comment or who knows. To figure out what's going on with this first sentence, I do need to pay attention to the content of what he's saying. He says in this first sentence, if you snitch, you leave yourself open to be killed. Well, notice that's working together with the premise after because, where he says, I wouldn't want someone to kill me. Those are working together as his intended support for his conclusion that he could never snitch. In other words, the first statement, which is in a sentence all by itself, the last statement, which is after because, are working together as reasons that he intends as reasons to believe his conclusion that he could never snitch. Okay, I hope this has been helpful for you. If you have any questions at all, definitely let me know. I'll talk to you soon again in another video. Take care and so long for now. Bye.